we acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, sea and community. We pay respect to them and their cultures and to elders past and present. My name is Andrew Ward and I'm the Manager of Emerging Technologies at CASA, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. I'm joined by Mr. Greg Tyrrell, my co-moderator. Greg is the Executive Director of the Australian Association for Uncrewed Systems, the AAUS. Welcome to the first of our RPAS and AAM industry sessions. This webinar is an update on the regulatory safety policies underway and committed to by CASA that were originally prioritised by the RPAS and AAM regulatory roadmap published in 2022 and its regulatory roadmap review that was published in late 2024. It is important to note that the RPAS and AAM roadmap set the priorities for CASA to deliver the policies and guidance identified, which projected a timeline for when those artefacts would be needed by industry and could be expected to be developed. The roadmap did not solve all the policy questions that the RPAS and AAM industry will need answered. Those answers are being developed by technical working groups populated by industry already underway or yet to be formed across the timeline set out in the roadmap. These sessions will be held twice yearly, are an outcome of the review to the roadmap in 2024, and were an initiative of its industry technical working group. A reminder to everyone that this session is being recorded. I'll hand over to Greg Tyrrell now.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to be here. The purpose of these sessions are to ensure that CASA is regulatory providing updates to industry on the roadmap, specifically what work is underway and what are the priorities. Also to promote industry engagement. Industry has played a significant role in the co-design of the roadmap and will continue to provide input via an ongoing technical working group, as Andrew has mentioned. The roadmap was developed through this process to make sure that regulatory development supported industry goals while maintaining a safe aviation environment. This session will be followed by a TWG meeting next week as a mechanism for consultation on industry session outcomes and any resulting actions recommendations for the way ahead. Industry had the opportunity to engage via the sessions by reaching out to TWG members, and they'll be listed later on in the presentations, or reaching out to AAUS. As the peak industry associations for this sector, AAUS is engaging with its membership on a daily basis via its member-led advisory groups. AAUS regularly captures what is important to industry, and these are represented to CASA on a regular and ongoing basis. We welcome any input on roadmap matters at any time. Thanks, Andrew. Back to you.
Thanks, Greg. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Ms. Jacqueline Smith, the Manager of RPAS Regulation and Policy at CASA. Over to you, Jackie.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Smith, Manager of RPAS Policy and Regulation. We are responsible, please don't hold it against us, for Part 101 of CASA and its Manual of Standards. And we work closely with the CASA specialists also presenting today to improve the now 20-year-old regulatory suite for RPAS. So the topics that I'm going to cover today are listed here. Firstly, thank you very much for your questions and highlighting the issues that you most want to hear updates on within the context of the roadmap initiatives. A number of questions fall outside the scope of the roadmap, but I've endeavoured to cover as much as possible in this presentation. These updates will be general and relatively high level due to the compressed time, but also because of some of the work that's still under policy and proposal development. For regulatory relief amendments that do not impose additional burden on industry, we generally release these as soon as we can, where consultation is not mandated under our regulatory development requirements. This provides CASA the ability to pull on regulatory levers such as general exemptions and other mechanisms where the safety risk is negligible or controlled in other ways. For more complex matters and regulatory relief, we are focusing on engaging earlier with industry to help co-develop these pathways, for example, through technical working groups, and then release the proposal for public consultation. We will continue to seek industry input on new and novel operations and the future regulations that will support them. Everyone's favourite topic, applications and CASA process. We know application wait times are a significant issue for industry, as well as our staff, and we thank you very much for your patience as we work through this with you. We continue to prioritise and pursue a number of strategies to streamline application processes. These strategies include a dedicated complex application stream, a dedicated low complexity application stream, and a streamlined BVLOS operator assessment process. While digitisation plays a role in these efforts and work will continue in this space, our broader objective is to minimise the need for applications where possible. We aim to achieve this through developing and implementing outcome-based operating conditions and risk thresholds, guiding and assisting a mature RPAS operator through their documented practices and procedures, and using other legislative mechanisms such as general approvals and operational trials, sometimes called sandboxes, until we're able to amend the regulations. We also continue to horizon scan international regulatory authorities' rules and regulations and their supporting safety cases for applicability here in Australia. To support a maturing RPAS sector, we are developing a better regulatory structure that places greater emphasis on operator responsibility and accountability, operator oversight of their operations, and appropriate documented practices and procedures for your operations, adherence to these and record keeping. We recognise the importance of clear industry guidance and clarity of the standards and requirements to assist industry to submit improved applications for the operations they want to conduct. We strongly encourage operators to submit applications specifically for the operation they intend. We are receiving applications for operational volumes that are over and above the intended operation, which causes additional assessment time, as these are usually more complex. And this has a direct flow-on effect for all of industry application wait times. CASA will continue to refine and publish guidance on appropriate material to support your applications, in particular for SORA-supported operations. We're also working on updating a number of advisory circulars, temporary management instructions, including the operations over and near people TMI, to expand and clarify the existing operational pathways to make it clearer and easier for operators to understand what is required to operate safely. We also publish our service delivery data on our website, so you can track our improvement in this space. It is happening, I promise. I invite you to explore these statistics via our website, and for more information on how you can apply for your operation, you can also find this information on our website. SORA. CASA is heavily engaged and contributes significantly to the JARIS SORA working groups and plenaries, which are being attended in Brussels, Belgium this week. As part of our commitment to SORA, we continue to review and validate elements of version 2.5 to ensure it is fit for purpose for the Australian context and can be implemented in an open, transparent and efficient way. Through the JARIS working groups, we are also working closely with international aviation authorities to ensure consistency where possible and general applicability for like operations between countries. We continue to prioritise the validation of SORA 2.5 and the required implementation artefacts for CASA and industry. BVLOS Sale 3 application and assessment processes in particular will benefit from a considered implementation process. This work will continue with priority, and we will communicate with industry our anticipated transition timeframes and requirements when these are firmer, but we are tracking towards an implementation date in November 2025. CASA has already implemented the most significant element of SORA 2.5 through the quantitative ground risk model published in our updated ground risk assessments requirements in the alternate criteria set out in TMI 2024-03. Our goal is to not require that every operator be a SORA expert, but rather build the elements of SORA into the application process and operating profile, reducing the requirements and burden on operators and ultimately the CASA inspectorate. We recently published additional information on SORA on our website, so please check it out for more details. Beyond visual line of sight operations, we acknowledge that in addition to addressing long assessment wait times, industry wants additional guidance and simplification of complex BVLOS operational requirements and approval process. To address these concerns, we've implemented immediate relief items for BVLOS assessments. We released the alternate ground risk population categories in the BVLOS TMI. This was to suit the context of Australia's population spread across our geography. The SORA operator assessment process has also been streamlined from the initial assessment and approval process to reducing subsequent BVLOS operator profile assessments through a reduced scope review. We're also exploring opportunities for location agnostic approvals, what that looks like, and the key risks and mitigators. As part of this work, we are also testing if self-assessment is a viable pathway. We are looking at the general conditions and requirements, operator maturity, knowledge and competence, and how this would achieve and maintain an acceptable level of safety. Industry engagement on this will commence as soon as CASA is ready. This work reflects CASA's commitment to enable emergency services to respond quickly to unplanned operations while maintaining an acceptable aviation safety in higher risk environments using BVLOS operations. CASA continues to work with law enforcement and fire and emergency services on the development of a bespoke BVLOS approval to respond to emergencies, which is anticipated to be released in Q3 of 2025. We also issued an emergency instrument for emergency services RPAS operations following Tropical Cyclone Alfred, and we will continue to assist these agencies with priority to enable urgent operations as needed. We're also prioritising analysis of lower risk airspace as part of considering whether we can grant a general approval or a regulatory change to enable lower risk BVLOS operations, including as a priority to support the agricultural sector and regional Australia. For medium RPA matters, a technical working group has been established to discuss and review proposed pathways to address the medium RePL and ReOC matters. The proposal to establish a comprehensive flight test for medium category-specific RPA is to enable remote pilots and training organisations to test the core and advanced competencies a remote pilot requires to fly any size medium RPA in its respective category. The proposal also seeks to address the issues for ReOC holders by removing the requirement to specify the medium RPA model on the certificate and instead specify the category of medium RPA permitted to be operated. We are anticipating release of this proposal for public consultation in July 2025, following and subject to feedback from the technical working group. For large RPA, CASA continues to work to find a regulatory pathway for commercial operations using large RPA. We have very nearly finished finalising an interim approach to providing for commercial operations of large RPA, pending the development of necessary certification standards and related adjustments to the legislation as may be necessary. There are regulatory matters that impede resolution of the issue. This is mostly because when Part 101 was made in early 2001, the underlying assumption was that in the future, all large RPA would be type certified by the time they were ready for commercial operations, and we now know that this is not the case. CASA will communicate on this issue as soon as we can. For research and development matters, we are continuing to develop the discussion paper and aiming to release this for public feedback in June 2025. This is a roadmap objective scheduled for release in Q1 of 2025. However, due to competing priorities and resourcing, it has been delayed. The discussion paper outlines our understanding of the key issues around research and development operations, and it seeks industry feedback on these and other matters to help inform progress in this sector. In closing, I have used the word prioritise a lot in this presentation. These 6 topics that I've covered, they cover a broad number of priority initiatives, each equally important to you and your respective operations. For industry, we know based on your feedback, these are the priority items that need immediate attention. Please know that we are working hard to achieve this in a measured, validated and safe way. Lastly, we will continue to use novel situations as opportunities for us to collect meaningful data about the safety of operations and to use that data to inform future regulatory settings. This is effectively a regulatory sandbox construct, even if we don't call it that. In some cases, we may stop an operation either because we are dissatisfied with the safety outcomes or because we want to review the data before deciding how to proceed. We hope that industry will acknowledge that this is an appropriate response for CASA and embrace the shared responsibility we have for ensuring the safety of novel operations. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Christine Bogue-Hodgson, Team Leader, Airspace Strategy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jacqueline. So moving now onto our airspace update, I'm going to be discussing the Australian Future Airspace Framework, or AFAF, as we colloquially know and love to call it, and providing you with some initial input on that particular area. So what is the AFAF? At the outset, it's really important to understand and appreciate that AFAF is looking at all airspace. So it's not restricted to only that airspace where RPAS and AAM will initially and potentially ultimately be operating. It actually is looking from surface all the way to suborbital airspace, including controlled and uncontrolled airspace. So it has a much broader implications. AFAF is a concept that will provide Australia's approach to the decision-making associated with Australian airspace. So what that means is that it will provide input into how we are making safe and efficiency decisions in relation to integration of all airspace users. The AFAF is a concept that will be used to allow CASA to be able to observe, assess and review how we're making decisions and make those informed and evidence-based decisions regarding any proposed airspace changes moving forward. It provides a protocol on how CASA will monitor the airspace and how it will make those transparent, consistent and scalable approach for airspace change proposals. Most importantly, the AFAF will include an end state, and that end state will be to provide the safe and efficient airspace while being integrated in a fully equitable access airspace, allowing technological advancements for aircraft based on air navigation performance using the ICAO performance-based outcomes approach. It's not a new airspace classification system, and at this point in time, there are no proposals to introduce a dedicated airspace based on specific user types into Australia. That said, AFAF will not necessarily preclude Australia from aligning with international standards that may be developed in the future. But the essence is that our aspect of providing safe and efficient airspace that allows integration and equitable access for all airspace users. How will the AFAF work? Well, there will be a 3-volume suite of documents that will support how those decisions will be made, and those documents will be available to any proponents for airspace changes through the AFAF webpage, which will become available during 2025. The 3 documents that will be available will include Volume 1, which will be the Airspace Foundations and Airspace Policy documents relating to the underpinning foundations for AFAF. Volume 2 will be the Concept of Operations. That Concept of Operations will include an 8-step model for airspace change. That will include elements such as consultation, research, providing a performance case, risk analysis, and also trying to maximise the ICAO 11 key performance areas associated with any airspace change that may be being considered. Volume 3 will be the long-term strategic airspace plan. In that particular element, it will look at a living document that will record any of the airspace changes that are being proposed, including those that are not implemented, so that we can enable future learnings in the future. AFAF is looking at integrating and collaborating with a number of key stakeholders. Internally within CASA, we look at discussing with a number of internal stakeholders such as geospatial capability, air traffic control, safety education and promotion, and flight operations and standards. External to CASA, we collaborate extensively with the Department of Infrastructure, Air Services Australia and the Department of Defence. Industry are most certainly taken into account in terms of our AFAF technical working group, which meet at least twice yearly from 2025 onwards and provide input into industry's perspectives of Australian future airspace changes that are required. All of this is allowed to take place because CASA, under the Airspace Act 2007, is the airspace regulator and the airspace administrator, which provides us with the functionality to be able to make these changes and implement the AFAF moving forward. I'll now hand over to Will Whitelaw, who will provide an update on initial UTM.
Thank you, Christine. So I'm Will Whitelaw, and I'm going to provide an update on our initial approach and work so far on UTM. The roadmap and UTM action plan are both driving initial actions on UTM, with early efforts focused on delivering basic initial services within a tight timeline and with limited resource. Where possible, we're using initial UTM to prioritise quick wins, such as enabling low-risk operations, digitising services and reducing pressure on industry and CASA through faster approvals and streamlined processes. We're leveraging initial UTM providers and global standards to drive service delivery, tapping into their subject matter expertise. CASA is building a framework that provides a repeatable and fair means of enabling new UTM services and service providers as they mature and rapidly increase in number. CASA will set safety parameters to ensure these services are used responsibly and without introducing risk. This enables a competitive market where industry selects the most efficient solutions and underperformers will naturally phase out. If a service meets technical requirements, it's approved for use and avoids selection and formal tender processes. This approach keeps costs down, avoids tech lock-in, and fosters innovation without requiring government to build extensive systems. Of course, there are challenges as well. With limited resource, it's a completely new regulatory landscape. We need to balance fairness with industry involvement and the fact that UTM is still evolving globally. As a result, the initial scope is scaled back. Things like advanced air mobility and integration with conventional traffic will come later. For 2025-26, we'll treat the existing automated airspace authorization service as a UTM service. Maps and info on where you can and can't fly will continue to be delivered through the drone safety apps and then also through USS. And this will be known as the Airspace Awareness Service. This is also classified as a UTM service. And then Air Services are introducing two new services, which will be operational planning and strategic coordination. So this will make up the 4 initial UTM services. These services are deliberately being rolled out voluntarily to avoid burdening industry and while giving developers, CASA and Air Services an opportunity to learn and iterate. Noting that regulatory change is often complex and can take a long time to implement. Initial oversight will be via USS contracts, which will give us flexibility and scalability. And the implementation will be guided by risk and supported by automation like digital testing. And this staged agile approach will help us build a safe, scalable and future-ready UTM ecosystem. I'll now hand over to David Peterson, who's our Manager of Airworthiness Emerging Tech. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. I realise there's a lot of information coming at you all, and I'm sure that there are over 300 people on the call, and everyone is looking for something slightly different. So we're trying to cover a large range of topics. So for those of you who I haven't met, my name is David Peterson. I'm the Manager of Airworthiness Emerging Technologies within CASA's Airworthiness and Engineering branch. So AEV is the part of CASA responsible for the definition and establishing of airworthiness policies, the certification of aircraft and new aircraft or modifications to aircraft, design approvals, continuing airworthiness information, and those kinds of things. So that is AEB's area, Airworthiness Engineering branch, and emerging technologies is my section of my area within that branch. So the RPAS and AAM roadmap is driving an increasing amount of activity for airworthiness engineering outside of our traditional, crewed aircraft engineering world, passenger carrying aircraft. And we're moving increasingly into these new areas like RPAS and AAM in particular, driven by the roadmap and the priorities that you have helped us set. So I want to provide you an update today on 3 near-term items that are defined in the RPAS and AAM roadmap for delivery in this year, in 2025, and our update in relation to each of those activities. So the first of the 3 is a roadmap item, which is AA1 in the roadmap, which is around the publication of guidance on cybersecurity for remote piloted aircraft systems. So particularly, that guidance is focusing towards low to medium risk remote piloted aircraft systems. So we're not talking about certified multi-ton UAS platforms. We're talking about small to medium size RPAS operating in constrained risk environments. So CASA is currently preparing an update to the AC 101 series of advisory circulars that I'm sure many of you are aware of, incorporating some new guidance on airworthiness cybersecurity for these low to medium risk RPAS operations. And that's targeting publication for consultation in Q2 2025 in alignment with the roadmap objective. The guidance is intended to be of a practical nature, but it also obviously has to establish a common baseline of understanding for people who may have quite different backgrounds in airworthiness and also in cybersecurity. So the guidance focuses very much on remote piloted aircraft systems at the aircraft level. It's very targeted to that. It's engineering guidance. It focuses on the threats that may be applicable to RPAS platforms, the prospective mitigations that you can employ either as designers, manufacturers, or operators of RPAS platforms, and rounds out with some best practices in relation to cybersecurity for this category of operation as we see it. So we're looking forward to bringing that to you for consultation, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback on that guidance product and hopefully incorporating some things back from industry when we hear from you. The second of the 3 items I want to update you on today is actually around the advanced air mobility side of the landscape. So we're talking the large passenger carrying, powered lift, electric vertical takeoff and landing kind of aircraft category here. The objective, which is in relation to 2 roadmap items, AA2A and 2B, is for CASA to publish policy, airworthiness criteria and certification guidelines for piloted AAM. So at this stage, it's focused just on piloted, crew on board, pilot on board, air mobility operations. There are other types of configuration for future AAM which are identified in the roadmap, but they are for later stages of work. In relation to the policy, I can tell you that CASA has adopted already a policy for the airworthiness certification of advanced air mobility aircraft, AAM aircraft, under our existing CASA 2117-2 sub-regulation, which is essentially special class airworthiness certification. Now, that special class airworthiness certification concept is, in our regulations, is almost entirely aligned with the equivalent regulatory construct in the United States FAA's Federal Aviation Rules FARs. So the 14 CFR 2117B is the equivalent pathway to our 2117-2 pathway. The FAA recently published some advisory material in relation to the type certification of powered lift eVTOL air mobility aircraft using the special class pathway, and that appears in FAA AC 2117-4 for those who are in that space and interested. We are now in the process of preparing our own advisory circular targeting our domestic AAM sector in relation to this topic, the certification of piloted AAM, and we are targeting publication of our AC in Q3 of 2025. In addition to those policy level activities, we've also been busy doing some other things to try to facilitate the early technical needs of the AAM sector in Australia. We held our first Hydrogen Airworthiness Summit or Industry Symposium in February of this year, February 2025 in Canberra. We had around 20 or so industry attendees representing various AAM design organisations, manufacturers, academia, industry, and some specialist SMEs in battery technology and some other specific areas. That was a very well received and successful initial symposium according to our participants, and we are in the process now within my area, AEB, of establishing some follow-on working group activities for hydrogen electric propulsion for AAM types of applications, but also expanding into the RPAS space. So in the meeting we had representatives from the RPAS sector who are using hydrogen to power UAS or RPAS platforms as well. In addition to these hydrogen activities, which is a key focus for us at CASA, because our industry is telling us for the longer operational ranges that hydrogen is potentially a very necessary element in the solution for our Australian context. In addition to that, we are also working with our international NAA or National Aviation Authority partners to harmonise certification requirements and the technical arrangements for the type certification, type validation and type acceptance of these AAM aircraft. The objective with that will be to allow as freely as possible aeronautical product aircraft from other countries that's been certified to come to Australia, and for aeronautical product that is generated in Australia to be equally recognised and exported for those other countries. So we're working hard on harmonisation. Lastly, another RPAS item that we are working on quite hard at the moment. There is an AA5 roadmap item to progress the development of a fit-for-purpose continuing airworthiness policy for higher risk RPAS. So essentially the challenge here is, as Jackie alluded to earlier in our presentation, we have a regulatory suite in Part 101 that was developed many years ago, where certain underlying assumptions were potentially made at the time. And as we move into a world of larger and more complex RPAS operations, I think some of these assumptions are being resurfaced, and we're finding out where was the regulatory suite aligned with reality, and where maybe do we have a little bit of a rough point to address. So we are looking closely at opportunities, policy opportunities, to provide a more efficient and a more proportionate continuing airworthiness policy arrangement for higher risk remote piloted aircraft system operations. So, for example, by high risk, I'm talking about large RPASs above 150 kilos and potentially into some quite large sizes, or we're talking about operations of smaller RPASs, but in very, very high SAL level operations, or even as certified RPAS operations over very high ground risk areas, etc. So we are very focused on trying to improve the outcomes for maintenance permissions in particular, that are as they are required under the current rules. So 101.260 and 101.265 in Part 101 are the provisions that start to include requirements for maintenance of large RPAS in that particular case, to be performed by certain maintenance approval and licence holders. Obviously, ensuring the competency of maintenance personnel is critically important to ensuring safe operation of these aircraft. But we also need to ensure that the outcomes are practical and that the requirements that are imposed are proportionate to the scale of the aircraft and the risk of the underlying operation. What I would ask for those of you on the call, particularly if you are considering or seeking to move into higher risk RPAS or large RPAS operations above 150 kilo MTOW, for example, to provide feedback via your technical working group representatives to us at CASA in relation to your current analysis and understanding of the maintenance policies and any prospective impediments that you believe those maintenance policies in Part 101 currently might bring to your operation. Obviously, ensuring safety is paramount for us, but we're also looking for opportunities to deliver industry flexibility and proportionality wherever possible. So that's an input item that we're looking at receiving hopefully from you in industry that will allow us as a deliverable later in the year to progress and shape our future direction in relation to these category of operations. So that's my update, and I think I'd like to call on Andrew Ward. Andrew, can you please take over? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your many questions. We've received over 120 questions from my last count that I heard was about 844 registered participants for this thing. Our subject matter experts have tried to address many of the key themes of your questions that was received via their updates already. Most questions that we'll answer here are representative of a group of similar questions. For the questions which time does not permit us to answer now, we intend to compile them and our answers into an FAQ, a frequently asked questions style document, organised to address the question themes raised by different parts of the sector. It's intended that we'll publish that document on the roadmap pages of the CASA website, as well as providing them directly to relevant stakeholders, the roadmap technical working group and the AAUS. We'll formulate a general response to cover questions asked about policy yet to be formed and consulted, but wish to point out that getting too specific now preempts consultation with you that is yet to be conducted. And as some of the speakers before me have alluded to, there are a number of questions in relation to the operation of large RPA. So I'd just like to reiterate that CASA continues earnestly to find a regulatory pathway for commercial operators in large RPA. And there are very specific legal constraints that have impeded us in resolving this issue in a timely manner. We'll communicate with the industry just as soon as we can, and please rest assured that we are actively working on this issue. I'll hand over to Greg Tyrrell for the first question, which is a question from the AAUS. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, my first question is one that we get asked a lot at AAUS, and this question is to Jackie. There's currently a lot of policy and regulation under development at the moment and in coming years. My question is, how does CASA plan to accommodate and support emerging leading-edge drone operations that may not fully align with the current state of the regulatory framework, such as BVLOS, large RPA, or even one-to-many operations in the near term? Will there be a structured pathway such as regulatory sandboxes or performance-based exemptions to foster responsible innovation and ensure safety while enabling growth of these leading-edge technologies?
Thanks, Greg. That's a great question. I'll try and step my way through it. So we know that we need to move toward more outcome-based, flexible rules. We really haven't seen this volume of change in aviation for some time, and we need to think about how drone rules, we need to think about them differently in some ways from traditional crewed aviation rule sets. As we've seen over the past 10 years, but more so in the past 5 years, we've really had to pivot from our traditional regulatory amendment cycle to keep up or try and keep up with that pace of change as industries, progressing, and with that demand as more and more operators enter into the market. While we've always been required, and we always will be required to adhere to the formal regulatory change process, we can be creative in our use of other legislative levers and push the detail of a regulation into our manual of standards where we can, and that will give us that greater flexibility to amend while still adhering to consultation process where we're not relying on Office of Parliamentary Counsel or that whole structure to amend our regulations. So for operations that don't fit neatly into our current framework, we assess the safety case predominantly through SORA, and where required, issue those exemptions until that operation is tested. It either increases in frequency, it then becomes the norm, and a regulatory or MOS change can be made. When these changes are made, we have to ensure that we future-proof those to remain as flexible as possible, and so that we can more easily update, for example, through the MOS. We're starting to push out that regulatory relief, that those initial general exemptions or trials or under a trial structure, and that will enable us to collect that valuable data from industry on the mechanism's effectiveness and to seek that feedback into the improvement cycle. Some could say that this is a regulatory or operational sandbox construct. So wherever we can, we'll be looking to collect that data from those trials or sandboxes, and may also need to stop the trial either because we're dissatisfied with the safety outcomes or because we want to review the data before deciding how we should proceed. And we hope that industry will acknowledge that shared responsibility we have for safety in these novel scenarios and work with us, including circumstances where we may need to pause that trial or sandbox. For the UTM AAM type sandboxes, these will require significant coordination between the Department, Air Services, CASA and other stakeholders with industry. So I have no doubt that they'll occur at some time in the future as those areas for the sandbox are identified and we're ready to move into developing that structure. I think I've answered most of those points, but any other CASA SMEs on the call, please jump in.
Thanks, Jackie. For the second question, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mr. David Lamb. David is a Senior Standards Officer in Flight Standards Branch and has responsibilities around flight crew licensing. And I think we can expect flight crew licensing to take a role in future webinars as these projects start to gather speed. David, can you please provide an update on CASA training and licensing requirement for piloted passenger carrying AAM aircraft?
Excellent. Well, thanks and hi to everyone. It's great to meet you, and I look forward to further engagement in the coming months and years. It's really encouraging to see such significant engagement and interest in this area, but of course we all know it's part and parcel of an operational approval. It's been alluded to certainly by Dave Peterson and Will Lightlaw that this is that the certification and the approvals around that lead to the competency requirements for licensing. The big takeaway for this question is that CASA has now opened a project to establish the licensing structure and requirements for AAM aircraft and RPAS operations. In fact, my recruitment last year is to support that function. Licensing is a requirement under the Civil Aviation Act, which states a person who performs any duty essential to the operation of an Australian aircraft must hold a civil aviation authorisation. So the intent behind that includes obviously crewed operations. We already know that. We also already know that that is uncrewed, but there'll be an operator element when we finally get to fully automated aircraft operations down the track. You can expect this to be a very large project with many elements, something that you can expect to run for many years, or at least until fully automated passenger AAM aircraft achieve certification and realisation. And I think it's probably fair to say we know that'll be a while off yet. The project will follow the normal regulatory change processes directed by government and explained on the CASA website, with a key aspect of this being fit for purpose, proportionate and harmonised to international standards. The other key takeaway I want to encourage you and give you some comfort on is, of course, this is going to include industry collaboration. And so at the right time, CASA will form an industry working group to establish the appropriate licensing framework and regime, guardrails, if you like. For your awareness, as we converge on a single mindset, licensing is effectively a risk management tool based on competency requirements. RPAS and drones, and Dave Peterson's spoken about this again, and AAM aircraft, as their names imply, are both very different. And so too will be the approach to licensing. Small, medium RPAS licensing currently contained in the CASA 101 is very different to large certified RPAS and AAM aircraft, which more closely align to the CASA Part 61. The competency requirements for crewed AAM aircraft is clearly very different to uncrewed, as are the risks associated with passenger carrying versus non-passenger carrying operations being profoundly different. Flight Standards Branch, for which I'm part of, we're leading the project. We're also responsible for the interim approvals and exemptions against the regulations if you become ready and the licensing regulations are not. This is not unusual nor insurmountable. We already have precedents, albeit in the flight test arena. I'll also say up front that CASA won't be rushing into a permanent regulatory suite in all areas, as regulatory maturity is directly dependent upon technical maturity, and we are yet to see full certification of any large RPA or AAM aircraft design. And as we also know, some certifications have not yet been established to design, let alone build and verify against. To assure you though, this is not going to prevent or delay the project, but we must be mindful of this. Segmenting the project is a way to manage this conundrum. To close, to allow others to answer some questions, I really want to encourage you to think about being available for the industry consultation when the time comes, and I anticipate on our project map that'll be sometime later this year. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'll hand over to Greg for the next question to Jackie.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Again, this question relates to complex RPAS operations and the use of SORA. Currently, no operations have been approved over SAIL 2. Why has this policy been adopted, and what is being done to increase CASA's SAIL appetite, i.e. SAIL 3 and SAIL 4 operational approvals?
Thanks, Greg. Firstly, that's not CASA's policy. Our assessment and approval process aligns with the SORA methodology, and we're already working through SAIL 3 and SAIL 4 applications, a handful. The key areas we're working on are airworthiness related operational safety objectives and some operational OSOs as well. We certainly recognise there is a significant increase in the documentation and evidence required to support a SAIL 3 operation from what is required for a SAIL 2 operation. We're in the process of validating elements of SORA version 2.5, which when fully validated for the Australian operating context, and those artefacts and industry guidance are created and communicated, we anticipate an increase in more fulsome SAIL 3 applications and approvals. However, approval is dependent on the application and meeting the requirements of SAIL 3, also the operator maturity and other evidence to support that approval. We certainly appreciate industry's patience as the sector develops appropriate SAIL 3 applications and as we build our capability to review and progress through these approvals.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie. I'll take the next question to David Peterson. What is the pathway for operation for very large, or perhaps we might term heavy RPAS, for instance, those over 1,000 kilos?
Thanks, Andrew. Great question. Yes, look, I think the first thing I'd say is obviously a lot of our focus from an airworthiness perspective at the moment in support of Jackie's area is around trying to enable the airworthiness aspects of those specific category operations, SORA operations, particularly into the SAIL 3 and 4 space and then beyond. But if we're talking about a 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 kilo UAS or RPAS platform, an aircraft of that size and scale is unlikely to fit within the confines of operational risk assessment under the existing kind of SAIL 1 to SAIL 6 spectrum, apart from in perhaps the most isolated areas and the most segregated of airspaces where there's little to no air or ground risk. So in a more kind of reasonable environment for an aircraft of that nature, I mean, essentially we're talking about certified RPAS operations, which is what Dave Lamb was alluding to earlier. And those certified RPAS aircraft would have a lot more in common really with conventionally type certificated passenger carrying aircraft or with advanced air mobility, eVTOL aircraft, those types of things. So the pathway essentially to go down certified RPAS is really to commence with the certification of the aircraft. So that's really where our area, Airworthiness Engineering Branch, leads and comes in. And so we have already had, I'm happy to tell people on the call, we already had quite a number of discussions with what you might describe as pre-certification or pre-application discussions with designers and prospective manufacturers of RPAS aircraft that are looking at building platforms, over 1,000 kilos maximum takeoff weight into this clearly certified RPAS category. In terms of the policy pathway, the way we take certification forward for these types of RPAS is very similar to what I described earlier in relation to the policy pathway for AAM, piloted AAM type certification. So we have existing mechanisms in Part 21, such as Special Class Airworthiness certification, that can be used to bring a certified RPAS project to fruition and to result in the issuance of a type certificate. And so that is absolutely available today, and we are ready and happy to begin to work with applicants, as we have begun to, who might wish to explore certified RPAS design and development within the Australian context. Perhaps the other thing to mention is that another very well established process within airworthiness engineering is the issuance of experimental certificates, particularly for R&D and showing compliance in relation to the certification of aircraft. So we have well established policies, protocols and practices for the control of risk in relation to those operations and for the issuance of experimental certificates. And that is equally applicable to a remote piloted aircraft. We can issue an RPAS, a large RPAS with an experimental certificate to allow certain operations, R&D operations or compliance showing operations for certification to be conducted. So obviously those certificates are subject to conditions around geography limitations, suitable areas and a number of other things, but those pathways are in place. So that's the certification side. That's the side of the house that I think I would represent and seek to speak to. Obviously there are operational questions in the longer term for those certified RPASs as well. But what I would say to anyone on this call who's interested or seeking to actively develop a significantly larger RPA, start a conversation with my area, with airworthiness engineering, and there is a pathway that we can follow from right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. The next question we've got here is a good one, and again for Jackie. How is CASA planning to accommodate FPV drone operations within the evolving regulatory framework, particularly in contexts such as BV loss and recreational racing?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It's a great question. I briefly covered beyond visual line of sight work that we're prioritising for industry in my presentation, and that will likely have a flow-on enablement for first-person view drone operations and the recreational sector. We're working on providing initial relief in this space through an alternate visual line of sight trial. That would initially permit RePL holders to fly assisted line of sight with the use of an observer or spotter under certain conditions without requiring a CASA approval. Sorry, pardon me, that's RePL holders and ReOC holders. We're anticipating release of this trial over the coming months, so keep an eye out for it. Sign up for our newsletter and industry communications. Following the outcomes of this trial, expansion to non-RePL holders and the recreational sector would be considered, and that will have flow-on effects for FPV racing in the recreational sector. For right now, FPV operations can also be conducted at your Model Aircraft Association sites. So yeah, lots of exciting things happening, all in the next couple of months.
Thanks, Jackie. The next question goes to Will Whitelaw, and it's in fact two questions that on the surface don't appear related, but they are. The first is, what things exist now that help not just commercial users, but also recreational operators understand and comply with the rules? And the second question is, will UTM and future regulatory change help streamline the application process to support faster approvals? Will.
Thanks, Andrew. Look, UTM aims to support broad industry participation, so that would be both commercial and recreational. And we do this right now through drone safety apps, and that will only be bolstered through UAS service suppliers, or USS, as they come online at the end of the year. I guess CASA really wants to promote innovation by being non-prescriptive in requirements where we can be. And what that does then is it allows an application developer to create tailored user-centric solutions. So, it'll be operationally focused, and a lot of the features that users require specific to their operation are actually already there in some of these products and will only increase in number. Things like checklists, workflows, situational awareness tools, and things that help to streamline your compliance. UTM will be great in that we expect that it'll offer a platform, I suppose, for CASA and industry to trial faster approvals. We can trial complex operations, for example, multi-drone flights, crewed integration, etc. We can look at using advanced data services to make one up, real-time population density mapping, for example. I guess the key to this is that testing these on RPAS in the initial UTM space will help us in building the infrastructure that we need to support future AAM. Hopefully that answers both all in one.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I thought I was going to go for Christine with this question. So the question we got here is, how will CASA's proposed airspace integration through AFAF affect early stage vertiport planning and BVLOS trial operations for autonomous and pilotless eVTOL aircraft?
Thanks, Greg, and it certainly is a jam-packed question. So looking at all of the different elements of that particular question, both the teams at CASA are responsible for AFAF, the Airspace Strategy team within the Office of Airspace Regulation, and the Future Aerodromes team within Air Navigation, Aerodromes and Airports. The vertiport design are working collaboratively already, trying to use a building block approach where we're developing foundational elements and then building upon those moving forward. So integration or segregation in controlled or uncontrolled airspace is a consideration for airspace management and AFAF, but contrastingly, the location of vertiports and the proximity of vertiports with other aerodromes is actually a planning matter. So the vertiport has no relativity to how aircraft operate, including any BVLOS or integration into controlled or uncontrolled airspace. CASA has already published Advisory Circular 139 version 1, which provides the initial vertiport design guidance for crewed flights operating VFR, and work is already underway to expand this to IFR operations, which will also then have some potential impact in terms of the further extension to BVLOS operations. AFAF will provide a process through which airspace change proposals, such as those to accommodate vertiport implementation, can then be assessed. So at this point in time, BVLOS approvals for RPAS under Part 101 will continue to be obtained through applications to CASA, but BVLOS will certainly be integrated into the airspace end state that is proposed by the AFAF to ensure that there's the safe, efficient and equitable access to airspace on the basis of performance-based outcomes rather than technical specifications.
Thanks, Christine. That's all the questions that we have time for today. I just wanted to give an update on a couple of matters. Firstly, the communication with CASA. There's many ways to reach out to CASA and to stay up to date with what's happening. CASA has an RPAS newsletter that is published in the CASA news site along with media releases on our website, and alerts can be provided through emails upon registration. These are often further promulgated by industry associations such as AAUS for information to their members and for broader awareness. There are processes for submitting suggestions to improve the rules and to seek clarification on existing rules via the Improve Rules and Regulatory Guidance sections of our website. Further, there is, as discussed at the beginning of the session, we've been having regular updates against roadmap items on the CASA website. We are still working through the integration of roadmap updates with other strategic programs, such as the Forward Regulatory Program and the General Aviation Work Plan, and have published 2 updates since the beginning of the year and plan to refresh as needed about every 6 weeks or so. Draft policy, or sometimes calls for input, use the consultation hub. So you can keep an eye out for those. The consultation hub is on the CASA website. As mentioned previously, this webinar has been recorded. We will send a link out to those who registered, and the recording will be on the CASA YouTube channel in the coming days. And I'll hand over to Greg now to talk about.
Thanks, Andrew. Just some closing remarks from my perspective. I guess many of the questions that were received were related to how you can provide input into roadmap initiatives. There are various industry working groups, as Andrew and others have talked to today, including AFAF, the Roadmap TWG, and also vertiports. There are also your industry association. So AAUS is here to take your input, and these are all good avenues to provide input into the ongoing process. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Greg. The technical working group membership is listed on the slide there. I thank you for your attention today, and thank you for your interest in this subject. And we will end this webinar now. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.